Get our PowerPoint underway. All right, so many things to navigate. All right, but welcome everyone to our September virtual membership meeting of the West Seattle Transportation Coalition. I swapped out our usual introductory slide for one of these. I think this was the Friday before the bridge opened. SDOT took a great photo of the sun setting and an empty bridge, and I thought it was a great view looking back towards West Seattle and sunsetting this terrible, what was it, 900 some odd days, that 920 maybe, that we were without a bridge. And so we are all very, Madison says it was Saturday night before it opened. So one of the last, literally last moments. Tonight's agenda. We will get underway with quick welcome and introductions, approve some previous meeting minutes. We will start off with a brief conversation with Greg Spotts, our new director of the Seattle Department of Transportation. We will talk a little bit about Seattle Office of Arts and Culture and some arts interruptions that are happening in our neighborhood. We'll move from that to a brief discussion about possible social events planning. We will have an update from one of our board members, John Wright, about the Fauntleroy Ferry Terminal Replacement Project Community Advisory Group. Cover any old business, new business, and we are scheduled to adjourn at 8:30, but I'm hopeful that we will be done earlier than that this evening. Very briefly, our purpose, if you're not familiar with us or welcoming our new SDOT director, the West Seattle Transportation Coalition is a peninsula-wide organization working to address transportation and commuting challenges for the nearly 100,000 people living and working on the West Seattle Peninsula. The coalition will accomplish this by securing the support of the residents of the peninsula, engaging elected officials at all levels to make improvements for all transportation users. We partner with government agencies and chat with them like we're doing tonight. And we engage with business, community organizations, neighborhood groups, and others to educate them or collect their feedback. Our goals are affordable and equitable transportation options, particularly in historically underserved neighborhoods, a transportation network that moves people and goods in an environmentally sustainable manner, and investments in transportation infrastructure to match Seattle's growth. We're getting towards the end of 2022. But our priorities this year have been to see capacity restored in the West Seattle Bridge Transportation Corridor and advocate for funding maximum mobility while the High Bridge is closed. I added some party people there because I'm happy that we'll be able to let those two priorities go from our annual legislative agenda. And we continue to support Sound Transit 3 planning, education, and outreach. And we're monitoring the SR 160 Fauntleroy Ferry Terminal trestle and span replacement project. We will not do all vocal introductions for those who've not been with us before, but we encourage you to turn to the chat window. Share your name, pronouns, any access needs you have. If you're over here, if you're in Seattle, your neighborhood. Our question for this meeting, we thought, well, what was the first thing you did when you heard the bridge was open? I will show a little later what I was doing before the bridge opened, and I have to say that when we actually got notification, I pretty much did exactly what I'm doing in the video. If you did not receive a reminder of tonight's meeting, you can be added to our WSTC email list. We send out 1, maybe 2 emails a month. You can switch to send a private chat message to John Wright, and he will see that you get added to that. Very quickly, we'll approve meeting minutes for May and July, which I think were mailed out to board members like last month, but I would entertain a motion to do so.
Motion made.
Thank you. Is there a second?
I second.
Thank you. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? And any abstentions? All right, and I'll pause very briefly to remind people that you can go to our YouTube channel or Facebook page to see videos of previous meetings. We have an ugly address there for YouTube, but if you go and just look, search for West Seattle Transportation Coalition, you'll see something that looks like the graphic there at the bottom. Moving along, tonight's agenda, we're starting with, as I said, our conversation with the Seattle Department of Transportation's new director about bridge reopening and his vision for Seattle transportation and other things. So we have Greg Spots with us, and he is being supported tonight by Madison Lincolnmeyer, who we are quite familiar with here. You can learn more about SDOT or specifically things that were done for the West Seattle Bridge project at that link. And for folks who are not aware, Greg is quite the tweeter and is regularly posting photos and different things. In fact, he started doing it, I think, before you even got here to Seattle, Greg, about everything you were excited about for Seattle. But some folks were following you even when you were down in LA. So welcome. And before I turn it over to you, I'll just remind folks, when Mayor Harrell nominated Greg to be our next director, some of the things he said was that Seattle deserves a transportation system that is safe, reliable, and equitable, and that our SDOT director is instrumental in implementing that vision. Mayor Harrell said that Greg understands that we must embed safety across all projects, view every decision through a climate lens, and build a transportation system centered on equity, quality, infrastructure, and multimodal solutions, which are a whole lot of things that we like to hear around here. So we are very excited to meet you, Greg. And let me get this out of the way here and turn it over to you.
Well, thank you so much. I really appreciate the invite, and it's great to be with you, and looking forward to spending some more time in person in West Seattle. I've had a chance to go there a few times, but definitely want to explore it a lot more. I guess before I talk about me, I want to talk about you. You guys have been through a lot. And from what I understand, there was a pretty remarkable community-wide effort to work through this together. And it feels like really something to be proud of. I wasn't here, but the folks who worked on it and other people have told me that it was really pretty amazing the way the community came up with mitigation projects in concert with SDOT about a lot. I think there's more than 100 of these small projects to help circulation during the time the high bridge was closed. And that, the community came together around how to ration the capacity of the low bridge to people of greatest need, which is very meaningful. And it's not every day that, folks find consensus like that instead of, kind of fight over it. So I know you guys have been really resilient and kind to each other. And that's really great. It was a lot of fun and very satisfying to MC the press conference on Friday. And I was joking with people, that's the sole contribution that I made to opening West Seattle Bridge. But I did go inside of it on my very first day on the job, my first hour on the job. I went inside both the West Seattle Bridge and the Swing Bridge. The inside of the Swing Bridge is pretty fascinating with these hydraulic actuators that rotate that thing. And I think each side of the bridge weighs 7 million pounds or something like that. And it's also just really impressive to think about the engineering effort of taking a unique structure that is suddenly, compromised and figuring out how to retrofit it so that, it's going to last and be safe. And, it's not like swapping out a part on your Chevy, there's no manual for how to do this. And I think just there's so many different ways in which it's a story of folks coming together, even how the funding was obtained. My mom watched the Friday press conference, and she remarked to me that she thinks the political culture here may be just a little bit more collaborative and mutually supportive than what she's used to seeing in New York or Los Angeles, where she's been living. So, maybe we can channel all that into some very positive and thoughtful new transportation ideas, for West Seattle. It'd be really great if we could build on that capacity somehow and find ways to work together. So let me tell you a little bit about how I wound up here. My whole support system is in Los Angeles. My mom, my two kids just started community college in Santa Monica. They live with their mom. My partner, Susanna, and I have been together 7 years. We own a townhome together in West Los Angeles. Very happy life in West Los Angeles. I've been working for LA City for 14 years. Of that, 4 years were with Mayor Antonio Villaraigosa. There was a time where I actually was the point person for him on a $10 billion portfolio of transportation mega projects. And then for the last 10 years, I've been with the Bureau of Street Services, which is part of Public Works. And for the last 7 years, I've been an executive there. So I've been overseeing at least 500 people for 7 years. So one interesting thing about me, in addition to being really passionate about, urban design and mobility and active transportation and Vision Zero and climate resilience, I'm a very experienced administrator. Like, I'm probably the most experienced administrator who's run SDOT in some time. It's not my first time overseeing hundreds and hundreds of people and multiple physical locations and hundreds of vehicles and 24/7 emergency response. My folks were first eyes on for the last 7 years for every single moment where there was something in the street that shouldn't be there. My people were out, on holiday weekends in the middle of the night, taking trees off the roadway. So, there is some new elements to SDOT that we didn't have in LA, but I feel very confident, as a seasoned administrator coming into the job. There's really a handful of things that attracted me to this role. One of them is Mayor Harrell and his One Seattle vision. I felt that it was almost audacious to run a unity platform in 2021. It really felt amazing and special to me. And the mayor's history of uplifting underserved communities, bringing people to the table who didn't even know there was a table, that appeals to me. I was working in LA as opposed to Santa Monica or Beverly Hills because investing in underserved communities, investing in BIPOC communities, investing in formerly redlined communities, that's really what animates me and gets me out of bed in the morning. So there was Mayor Harrell. There was the fact that SDOT has pretty much control of all the functions at the street level other than the street lighting. And I've seen, SDOT do some pretty big things like what's happening at the waterfront, tearing down the viaduct and $750 million of investment going in the waterfront. And also, some really gorgeous, holistic, multi-benefit streetscape. Right now, I'm living in South Lake Union and walking around and thinking about how all the real estate investment in new housing was leveraged to create like an entirely renewed streetscape. A streetscape with space for pedestrians, space for bikes, space for the streetcar, space for rain gardens, like beautiful rain gardens and little benches around the rain gardens. Like, I believe that the functional organization of SDOT with all the elements under one roof can enable a holistic multi-benefit street design that really excites me. And I'm really interested in, incorporating even climate resilience aspects to those multi-benefits as well. So, I decided to start with a listening tour. In LA, we have 99 registered neighborhoods. And I've actually worked in every one of them. Like, over 14 years, I did projects in every one of those 99. I've been to them myself. I have a little bit more of a like an encyclopedic personal experience of LA than most people ever will have. And it's exciting, but also unnerving for me to like start with very little knowledge of Seattle and its many neighborhoods. And so I felt like the best way to sort of accelerate my climb up that learning curve would be to be out in the field. And I told my staff, you know, I don't think I'm going to learn Seattle on a city PC with PowerPoint. You know, like I want to wear out a pair of shoes. I want to walk, bike, and ride transit with Seattleites. And I told Kristen Simpson, who's been amazing and really did great service to the people of Seattle by managing this department, leading this department in, all of 2022 until I arrived after Labor Day. I told her, this summer, there can only be one director at any given time, and I don't want to issue any direction until I get there. But to the extent you could help me ramp up to be able to have a listening tour happening from day one, that would mean a lot to me. And so we built a web form where people can express interest. We already have 70 expressions of interest. We're blending that in with listening tour stops with important stakeholders like the port and the transit agencies. And then also, my own staff is taking me out to see things. And it's really been amazing. I mean, it's been like this immersive experience. I've been out every morning other than Fridays. I'm doing Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. I start my day in the field. And it's funny, on Twitter, I'll post a picture of where I am, and people will say, yeah, but you haven't seen that there's no sidewalks north of 100th Street. And I'm like, oh yeah, I have. I've been there 3 times already. I've walked Aurora twice, and I've done Lake City Way also. And then people say, yeah, but what are you doing up north? What about the south? And I'll be like, yeah, I mean, I've already figured out that the best curry goat in the city is at Island Soul in Columbia City. And I walked the last bike closure weekend and rode it on Lake Washington Boulevard. I haven't seen it all by any means, but I've seen more than anyone could have expected me to have seen in 3 weeks of living here. And it's been great. I'm just more enthused than ever. I mean, the combination of the natural beauty that's everywhere in Seattle, beautiful bodies of water, beautiful stands of trees, Olmsted designed parks and boulevards. It's really, there's so much to work with, and then people have been super welcoming. It's funny, everybody warns me about the Seattle freeze to the point where I have like a line about it. I tell people I'm gonna do my best to like melt down that Seattle freeze with a little California sunshine. So I said that to somebody. Susanna, my partner, introduced me to one of her longtime friends over the weekend in Mount Baker. And we walked around for like an hour, and then she started talking about the freeze. And I told her my little line, and she said, Greg, you probably rank 99th percentile in friendliness among Seattleites. And I worried that was too high. Like, do I want to be the outlier of the maximum friendliness? But so far it's going well. Folks have been super, super receptive and welcoming. It turns out there's a lot of interest in transportation among Seattleites, and a lot of interest in local government, by the way. More so than LA. LA is kind of a backyard culture. Some people, you ask, where do you live? And they give you the name of their neighborhood. They don't say Los Angeles. Some of them even write the name of their neighborhood, as their postal address. They say, I live in Sherman Oaks. There are people plugged into local government, of course, but in LA, like the whole Hollywood contingent is really interested in national politics, and they're not really that interested in local politics. So I'm definitely feeling more interest. Oh, a West Seattle experience I had, okay. Dongo Chang, the former traffic engineer of SDOT, who's now at WashDOT, drove me all around in late July. And then he said, we really should see that ghost bike where that poor gentleman was killed at the end of the swing bridge. And so we parked in West Seattle. We walked over the swing bridge. We visited that very somber site. And then we walked back and the bridge was open. So we were waiting and all these sites, this was that day that was extremely hot. Remember like the 590-degree days in a row? This is that Saturday. It's like 6 p.m. It's been getting hotter every hour. And instead of cooling down by early evening, it's still getting hotter. I'm like melting at this point. And Dongo's been running me wild we've been in like 20 zip codes already. And his car doesn't have air conditioning either, by the way. You know, these cyclists start coming up who are coming back to come back home to West Seattle. And we're all waiting. And after the bridge connects and the gate goes up, they all ride off. And Dongo says, I'll bet one of them recognized you as a new SDOT director. And I'm like, oh, please. You know, I had a press conference 2 days ago. I'm in like a baseball hat and shorts. And besides, who cares about that, you know, of regular people? So like 3 hours later, a guy tweets at me, hey, I was behind you on the swing bridge, but I was too shy to say hi. So people are really interested. People are really interested. People have been coming up to me like cold on the street. Hey, Greg. And they don't look at me like, do I know you? Are you that guy? They don't know exactly who I am. And a lot of times they just want to say hi. Sometimes they have, one particular corner that they're really interested in. But I'm really enthused about the sort of interest level and engagement of Seattleites in this very complex set of issues and opportunities. I'm also really intrigued because Seattle's growing. There's only 2 cities in the north of the whole US that are growing, Seattle and Denver. The rest of the growth is all in the South, Sun Belt and the Southwest. And I think it's very fascinating to think about how do we pivot to the Seattle of the carbon constrained future and accommodate this growth. It's definitely a high class problem. It's a problem I'd love to have and I'm excited to embrace. But I'm really hoping that, in addition to bringing some really great improvements and enhancements of the transportation system, I hope that I can be a thought partner to other departments as well. I'm fascinated by how cities work, how, the streets connect to the parks and libraries, about the vitality of downtown. How are we going to preserve that vitality or enhance it in a time of remote work in a city that is number 2 in remote work share of any city in the country after Washington, D.C. I guess the folks who work for the federal government are all still working from home. So I just see this as an unlimited opportunity to make positive change. And I really want to do it with you. I think the era of transportation planners drawing lines on a map and then telling the community what they're going to get has to be over. And I don't even think it's okay if that planner is more enlightened today. I think we have to co-create projects with the community. And that's why I was so heartened by the fact that the mitigations were somewhat co-created with West Seattleites. Maybe that's even like a signpost for our work going forward. So with that, maybe I can take, questions till like 7:15.
That would be great. I will give folks a chance to think about what their questions are. If they want to drop questions in the chat.
I have a few stats, traffic stats.
Okay.
That were provided to me by staff that are pretty interesting. Maybe we should make this a guessing game. How about that?
Sure.
Okay.
Real quick, also, we'll give people an opportunity to raise their hand, where that is at the bottom there under, I think, reactions, right? If they're willing to talk, and my fellow board member, Kate Wells, will manage either reading questions in the chat or calling people out. But yeah, toss a couple stats at us, Greg.
Okay, so here's quiz question number 1. What percentage of West Seattle Bridge volumes pre-closure were achieved on Monday and Tuesday? So what percent of the traffic volumes that we had before the closure did we experience Monday and Tuesday? Somebody throw out a number.
30%?
50%.
25.
Lauren, what did you say? We have 30, 50, and what was the third guess?
25.
It's more than 50, so
Ooh.
the bidding can go up.
It was probably more spread out, maybe 70%.
66%, 2/3.
Wow.
So that's pretty interesting. Now, what kind of dip have we seen on the low bridge volumes since the reopening?
Probably none.
Oh,
He says no change. There is a dip. Somebody tell me a guess, the percent reduction in volume in the low bridge.
Well, all the buses, huh?
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, that's true. So the weight's definitely dropped.
The truck traffic is entirely dependent on ships and port. So, I mean, it's varies so widely.
It's actually down by half.
Oh, wow.
Huh.
And interestingly, the travel times on the detour routes are now down by 30 to 50%.
No surprise there.
And we do see an increase in volumes on some of your West Seattle surface streets that feed the high bridge. Volumes on 35th Avenue Southwest at Southwest Raymond Street increased 12% compared to last week. So those are your West Seattle bridge stats. So go ahead, ask me a few questions. You know, I am still getting up to speed on individual projects and programs, and the more down to the neighborhood level you get, I mean, you can certainly alert me to something you want me to look into, but I probably don't know a lot about like very specific neighborhood level projects.
Well, while
Right.
folks are coming up with questions.
I have a
there we
question.
go.
And it's, you know, we've all heard this. I'm an expert traffic engineer. Traffic control that's not credible does not improve safety. And I'm extremely frustrated with speed limits that have no correlation to what actual people that are actually driving. West Marginal Way was posted at 40 miles per hour for years. And then without any technical traffic study that Heather claimed was done, never was provided to me. She said there was one. I asked for it numerous times. No study was ever provided. And speeds, 85th percentile speed, still 50 miles an hour. On principal arterials, what does it take to get speed limits that are more credible to the driving motorists? I mean, 30 miles an hour on West Marginal Ways, not credible. 30 miles an hour on a number of other corridors, not credible. 25 miles an hour on multi-lane principal arterials is not credible. Why does the city insist on one size fits all?
You know, I don't know the answer to that, but I would be willing to say that as a growing safety emphasis takes place in our field, the idea of setting speed limits, letting like the users set the speed limits by setting them at a percentile, is kind of going out of fashion. And what's coming into fashion is the idea of setting speed limits around what would produce a safe operation of the street. You know, I want to mention that the very first day after, when I came in the office after visiting your bridges, I had a meeting and directed staff to conduct a top to bottom review of the Vision Zero program. And I feel that an excellent public agency should be responsive, innovative, transparent, and accountable. And to be transparent and accountable, we have to have a hypothesis as to why all the investments we're making in Vision Zero aren't producing the outcome goal we want, which is a reduction in killed and serious injured on our roads. And I do feel that like everyone at SDOT needs to come to work every day thinking that safety is their very first job. There can't be a single person at SDOT who believes that their core of their work is something other than safety. So, you know, that's the framework in which I'll be evaluating questions like what you asked about speed limits. You know, I have a master's in public policy, so I'm not a traffic engineer. I'm not a civil engineer. I'm not an urban planner or a landscape architect. I see myself more as sort of conducting an orchestra full of excellent sections of specialists. I don't see myself as like the person who signs plans or that I'm the chief street designer. Some previous directors have like spent a lot of their time like looking at plans and saying this curb should be 6 inches here. And I think there's other people who are better to do that. So I do think I will be looking into the speed limits, probably in the context of this top to bottom review of Vision Zero. But I think that the criteria I'll be using to evaluate that primarily will be the safe operation of the street.
I think one of the things I'd add to that, Greg, you started out with some SDOT stats. Chat with your folks about some of the data, because the data we got from SDOT's engineers on some of the first projects that dropped speed limits was essentially like they achieved the goal, right? The average speeds went down, but in some cases they only went down on average 1 or 2 miles an hour. But the shadow stats that were right there on the charts that they came and shared here with us was that essentially the number of people now breaking the law and driving above the speed limit went up dramatically, which seems like perhaps that's like there's got to be a way that we get the first goal without maybe getting that second goal.
Or even like ultimately the goal would be a safer operation of the street. And that's one reason why I want to do some like fresh analytics of all this data and produce some findings that can lead to recommendations on how to strengthen Vision Zero, because it sounds safer to reduce the speed limit, but is it producing fewer killed and seriously injured on those particular streets? We need to know that.
All right, looks like Don's got his hand up.
Welcome, Greg. I guess I really appreciate the goals and priorities you've talked about. And one thing I wonder about in West Seattle is now that we have this bridge repaired, how do we avoid going back to normal, where we have, say, 80,000 people taking private car as their mode of choice, the easiest way for them to cross the river and go to other places from here. I was a little disappointed in some of the mitigation work, which could lead to more investment and more results in getting people to take transit and ride bikes and walk to their destinations. But really only a very tiny percent of the funding was spent on those kind of efforts versus throughput for private cars and for trucks. And we need to move goods. We need to move freight and buses on the streets, but we don't necessarily need to move quite so many cars quite so easily. And I'm just wondering if you have thoughts about that.
I do think that there's sort of a disconnect at this particular moment, not just in Seattle, but elsewhere, that, states and cities are setting these very aggressive carbon reduction goals, but we're not reducing the transportation share of carbon emissions anywhere. I mean, my previous home state of California has made massive progress on reducing carbon emissions from electricity generation. I mean, it's remarkable. We had one day in March where for a moment there, renewables produced 101% of demand, which is just a really incredible thing. But in California, we have not been able to make the transportation, total annual carbon emissions go down even a little bit. So we have these bold, aggressive goals, but we're not seeing the progress. And I think also in this industry or this field, to some degree, like there's a lot of sort of old habits and old culture that seems to be quite challenging to dislodge, where, you know, the feeling is the main job is to like move as many vehicles as possible. And it's very interesting because really like no one's ever been able to reduce traffic. Like so many people, both politicians and traffic engineers have promised that they're going to reduce traffic, and the public has voted for all kinds of transportation funding measures because they've been promised to reduce traffic. And traffic is largely a function of economic activity and the society's vitality. And the only downtown I've ever been to in the US that doesn't have traffic is Cleveland. And that's because Cleveland has a median income of 35,000 and they've lost population every decade since 1960. You don't want to be Cleveland, you know? You know, it's interesting that like there's been this endless investment to reduce traffic, and none of these things have actually reduced traffic. And there's a need for new types of outcomes, you know, safety, the attractiveness of active transportation, connecting parts of our community rather than dividing it with, you know, car-oriented, you know, transportation. I mean, my goodness, the first time I set eyes on Aurora, it almost kind of broke my heart. Like I was staying at the Courtyard Marriott in Westlake, and on the map, on Google Maps, you know, there's no topography, and I wanted to go to a restaurant in Queen Anne. I naively thought that I could walk from Westlake to Queen Anne, you know, and I realized that I had to climb these like unusual stairs to get to this pedestrian bridge. And when I like looked out over Aurora and this endless row of K-rail, I was like, this is like dividing the city in two, you know, like people can't cross here. And even physically able people are not going to want to climb this kind of dirty, maybe smelly pedestrian bridge structure and be 4 or 5 blocks out of their way and cross this place. And it really, it struck me as like, wow, you know, for all the beautiful things I've seen in Seattle, this is really not beautiful. And it's really wild that these two communities can't really be, you know, they can't share dry cleaners and restaurants, and people can't visit each other, and they can't go to the park in this other neighborhood. And then, you know, last week I was taken on a community walk of the northern part of Aurora, and that was also very sobering, with the lack of sidewalks, the public safety challenges. You know, the community members were like telling me it might not be safe to take Rapid Ride E back downtown, and I did take it. It was okay. But, you know, Aurora and Rainier, I keep hearing are really critical arterials that need change. I visited, is it called Judson Square on Rainier, where there's going to be a new light rail stop soon, and there's no sidewalks there, and there's kind of this, you're supposed to kind of go under the freeway into this overgrown area that's like a sidewalk bypass, and it's like a place you would never ever go on your own. And you know, there's lots of places in South Seattle where you're expected to cross unsignalized traffic that's getting on the freeway. I mean, you never want to get in between someone and them getting on the freeway to go home in the PM, you know. There's a lot of work to do out there, and the sort of older assumptions about what this whole industry is for are written into our streets, are encoded in the physical geometry of our streets, and a lot of it, you know, needs a lot of help.
Thanks. And I do hope you will have a chance to look at the Streets Illustrated manual. That
Yes,
it is one of those collaborative efforts that
Excellent.
lots and lots of people got involved with, and it really defines visions for what our streets can look like, the way the things you're talking about. So,
excellent. I will do. All right. How about one
All
last question?
All
By the way, I
right.
ate at Raccolto. That was really, really good.
Yes.
We wanted to, Suzanne and I wanted to spend money in West Seattle on the first night that you could take the bridge over there. And Heather recommended that place. And that bolognese pasta with the lamb, with the ground lamb, that's a damn good dish. So we want to
Agree.
eat our way around West Seattle for sure.
Great. I'll go ahead and do the first question from the chat. There are a couple of others, so would it be okay for us to send those your way and get a written answer later?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, that'd be great. All right, on the assumption that your budget is less than the SDOT maintenance division would like, what do you see as the budgetary priorities for SDOT? Certainly, West Seattleites are sensitive to bridge maintenance.
So yeah, so is Councilmember Peterson, who chairs the Transportation Committee. And he has some of the movable bridges. And actually the day that Mayor Harrell had the press conference announcing me as his nominee, I told SDOT folks that I wanted to meet one of the crews working, and they said, "Oh, we're watering down the University Bridge. You should go there." And who's there waiting for me but Peterson, wanting to talk to me about how important it is to manage these bridges thoughtfully. I've actually met with several experts, including one of my colleagues in Los Angeles, who until recently was the manager of the Bureau of Engineering's bridge program down there with hundreds of bridges. And, we have to make sure we have the people, systems, and technology to bring a contemporary asset management approach to the bridges and indeed all of the assets that we're maintaining. We need to have an estimated life cycle on each asset. We need to know what maintenance interventions are needed to achieve the life cycle that we expect to have and how much they would cost. And then we can prioritize and sequence those interventions based on that comprehensive asset management approach. Today with the bridges, we have a condition assessment, but we don't have a life cycle estimate for each of the bridges, and we haven't identified the maintenance interventions that are going to be needed to attain that desired life cycle. So that's something I'm going to be working on strengthening from a starting point of implementing all of the recommendations in the audit about the bridge maintenance that came out 2 years ago. Why don't I do one more before I go?
All right. Wonderful.
Bonus
Let me
question.
scroll up to it. Thank you. How do you combat the war on cars trope that gets invoked by certain constituencies anytime transportation resources are directed towards anything other than moving cars faster?
I was asked this by the radio reporter. Is it KIRO? I can't remember the name of the station. This radio reporter at a press avail I had last week asked me, "How do you feel about the war on cars?" And my answer was, it wouldn't be the one Seattle approach to have a war on anything. And I mean that, I'm actually, the mayor has told us department heads, it's our job to paint in the detail on what one Seattle means in our discipline. And as I'm talking to people and as I'm, looking at conflicts between different stakeholders or different users, I'm trying to think, what would be the one Seattle approach? And I know that sometimes there's limited right of way and it's a contested space, but I'm really avoiding the idea of pitting different mode users against each other. I don't like that. I watched that happen a few times. In LA, there'd be like a bridge project and the engineers would say, well, we have 14 feet. The bikes and pedestrians can duke it out to see who gets it, I don't like that. Like I said, I believe in holistic multi-benefit solutions. And, one of my favorite field walks so far has been up Madison for the Rapid Ride G project, which is $100 million complete street. And that street is kind of implementing to the fullest of bus rapid transit that we've seen in Seattle with the center bus boarding stations and the off-street payment. It's rationalizing those five-way intersections as that diagonal Madison cuts across other arterials, and in some cases, significantly reducing pedestrian hazards in the geometry of those intersections. And there's a water main being replaced underneath. So you got 100-year infrastructure refresh going on as a result of this multimodal corridor project. And I find that very exciting, where you can get a lot of different things done at the same time and plant a bunch of new street trees. So when somebody says war on something, I'm going to approach that with some skepticism and perhaps some optimism that maybe it doesn't have to be a war. Maybe I'll leave it there. An optimistic take on transportation from Greg Spots. I think
Hey,
you're on-
Michael, you're muted.
Thank you. Thank you so much for taking time with us, Greg. We like to hear that. You know, if you want to come out and walk sometime and walk potential or the future possible light rail routes, we'd love to point out a few concerns along those.
That would be very nice. Let's set that up.
yeah.
That would be wonderful.
We'll let you get away. I understand your partner's in town, so hopefully you can go spend some time with her.
Excellent. Thank you so much. And so nice to meet you guys. Looking forward to seeing you out on the streets in West Seattle.
All righty, bye-bye. All right, let me get us back here. Oops, I hate when it does that. All right, so I thought I'd pause for some fun. I'm biased, admittedly, that I'm featured here and there in it, as I participated in my West Seattle Transportation Coalition T-shirt. But if folks haven't seen the fun video of how West Seattleites might react when we first found out that the bridge was open. And of course, my screen is not playing nice. So let me stop for a second and just share out the other screen. No. All right, we're live. What fun we have. Okay. I'm not sure which I like better, the fact that we got to go wild and crazy and in the always intersection at the junction, or the fact that at the end the Chief South cheerleading squad just randomly appears and we were all asked to just act like that was the most normal thing, that of course a cheer squad just appears when everybody's excited and ready to party. But we'll be talking randomly. Instagram will be featuring it at several points during the rest of the meeting here. But let me get back to our PowerPoint. We want to talk very quickly. Unfortunately, the program manager from Office of Arts and Culture couldn't join us tonight. But we're excited to share a little bit of information about their Arts Interruptions program. Excuse me. Folks may remember a few years back, we had some art installations along the north end of the Delbridge neighborhood, including folks may remember the colorful goats that were installed underneath the bridge along the bike path there. So there's a new art installation that should be going in right now along the Delridge Highland Park neighborhood greenway. You can learn more about the program at that web address. Royal Ali Barnes, who's the acting director, says that art interruptions give opportunities to emerging artists in our local community that are looking to break into the field of public art. We are excited to see 4 artists commissioned for Art Interruptions 2022 that have not participated in past iterations of the program. And these are artworks that inhabit city sidewalks and parks and offer passersby a brief interruption in their day, hence the name, eliciting a moment of surprise, beauty, contemplation, or humor. And this is funded by SDOT's portion of the 1% for Arts funds. So one of the featured I'm not even going to attempt to properly pronounce some of these authors' names, but you can go to maybe Toka Valu. You can go to Toka Valu's website there. I also have highlighted an Instagram address where you can see, as they're showing here on the right-hand side of the slide, he actually filmed himself installing. So his piece, I guess, is up already along Southwest Myrtle Street and northeast corner of 18th Avenue Southwest on the retaining wall there. And that features shark and octopus depicted in a titanic struggle, as he put it. So you can learn a lot more about that. Check that out. Next featured artist is All the Ways We Found. All the Ways We Found Through. I give up. Claire Johnson. So you can go to her website. Location for her art is going to be at the backs of dead end, road end, and speed bump signs throughout the greenway between South Kenyon Street and Southwest Myrtle Street. So it's an extra bit of like scavenger hunt, I guess you could say. We had a similar feature when it was installed along the Delridge Greenway with things on the back of signs. Claire's vividly detailed artwork mirrors how neighborhood greenways can uncover surprising new joys in familiar places. There's also Schools Out by Maleka Gormley, whose art will be featured along the Sanislo playfield fence along 21st Avenue Southwest. Maleka's project is a portrait series capturing the afternoon ease of Sanislo Elementary School students after school lets out. Children enjoying each other's company, connecting with friends, parents, and guardians, and walking home. Her designs focus on the legs and feet of the students, communicating their energy and liveliness and their varied self-expression through clothes and shoes. And the final artist is Tommy Segundo. It's called Animals of the Salish Sea. You can see his featured Instagram account. I grabbed this image off the Instagram account. I'm not certain if this image is one of the featured images along the greenway, but apparently various signs located along the greenway will display Northwest coastal artwork of animals found in the Salish Sea, which is the traditional indigenous name for the Puget Sound. Each animal has a significant role within the Salish Sea and Duwamish River ecosystems. Since time immemorial, these animals have held great meaning to the indigenous people of the city we now call Seattle, which, if you're not already aware, is actually named after the Duwamish and Squamish leader, Seah. Is how it's I can't, it's a glottal lambda, I believe is the sound. So even Chief Self as our local high school is named. Doesn't quite get at the proper pronunciation of it, but that's where the name of our city is. So do make some plans to get over to our greenway and check out some of these things. Are there any questions from folks about any of the bits of descriptions or images or websites that we've had shared with us? All right. Continuing on with the rest of our agenda, folks who are sticking around, again, we're going to try and go through pretty quickly. We're going to roll from the art interruptions into a quick discussion about possible social events. We'll have an update from the Fauntleroy Ferry Terminal replacement project. We'll cover old business and new business. If you are leaving us before the end, just a quick reminder, again, that we're on our new bi-monthly meeting schedule, which means our next public membership meeting will be in November. And then just a reminder that every year, because the fourth Thursday would be Thanksgiving, and we assume you all be happily eating food and stuffing yourselves with family, please join us on the third Thursday, which is the 17th this year. Let's pause and have the discussion before I move forward. So we talked really quickly about the art interruptions. And one of the things that the board chatted a little bit about was the possibility of planning a bike ride. I might sort of put our resident Bike Connections board member and WSTC board member Kate on the spot. She has ideas or thoughts, but it might be a great way for us to work with Bike Connections or some of the other groups in town. You know, maybe we can, not just our folks here in West Seattle, but maybe we want to invite some folks from other parts to take a ride over on the West Seattle Bike Trail and come over and go along the Greenway and check out some of this art. So what do some people think of that, or people have other ideas? Now that we're on a bi-monthly schedule, doesn't mean that we can't get together and do things in our off months. It just means that they're not months that we're going to have an in-person or virtual meeting.
Well, I think a ride sounds like a lot of fun. I'm kind of trying to keep my eye on it and see when the projects are all finished, which unfortunately will probably take us into the rainier part of the year at this point, since they're not finished. So we'll have to play it by ear a little bit, like plan a date and maybe it gets canceled and rescheduled for rain reasons or something. I just do know that it would have to be a very casual ride without waivers and official kind of, I wouldn't want to do it in a, in too big of a group too, because once you get past a certain number of people, it's really hard to ensure everybody's safety and, without a good support team.
I do know Arts and Culture shared that the installation is planned for a whole year.
Oh, good. Okay.
Again, if it's anything like Delridge, some of the stuff like the what's placed on the back of signs are essentially kind of like almost like stickers.
Okay.
So it's easy for them to stick around, but it's also they stick around as long as they do until weather or mischief affects them. But so they are intended to be around for a while, and Arts and Culture might be interested in working with us on planning some sort of event, which,
Okay.
Fingers crossed, maybe that opens up some ability to get a little funding for something at the end, or a little bit of extra support with planning and logistics. So
okay. And I can also, Don has left the meeting, but he led an arts and parks ride a few months ago and might be able to share some notes of some additional spots along the way that we could maybe hit up as a bonus.
Any other folks want to share thoughts or drop things in the chat, or feel free, you can always send us an email at info@westseattletc.org if thoughts come to mind after the meeting, or you just don't want to share them in front of everybody. And I drop that into the chat so people will have it. I don't want to spend too long, keep us moving if folks are interested. So I will take our pause as we're talking about bike rides. Message came in from our friends at Seattle Neighborhood Greenways. Greg actually mentioned going to see the ghost bikes, so it's good that Greg already knows some of the things that are of top of mind for us. But the Seattle Neighborhood Greenways has planned a memorial ride for Rob Mason, who was the gentleman who was killed in, as far as I know, what is still an unsolved hit and run there, unless one of our media folks on the call knows more. As they said, Rob was a loving husband, a caring friend, and a gentle soul. And they shared a photo there of him with his wife. The ride is on Friday, September 30th. Start time is at 5:30. They're starting downtown at City Hall Plaza. Although they say if you prefer not to bike, you can also meet them at the crash site on the east side of the West Seattle Low Bridge. They are requesting RSVPs. You can learn more at seattlegreenways.org/Rob Mason. That's Rob with 2 B's, MASON. You can also go find them on Facebook and register there as well. They say, please join us for a memorial bike ride to honor Rob Mason's memory and raise awareness of the need to invest in traffic safety improvements on the streets of Seattle. We will ride slowly to the crash site at the base of the West Seattle Low Bridge. They'll be joined by Greg and have invited other officials in the media. And again, you can meet them directly on the east side of the West Seattle Low Bridge if you prefer not to bike with us, but you want to show up and show your support for addressing some of the increase in both bicycle and pedestrian deaths that we've seen in the last year or two here in Seattle. And with that,
Michael, just before you go on, if anybody's really interested in doing the full ride meeting at City Hall, I will be riding with at least one other person and probably more from the Low Bridge to City Hall Plaza. So starting at 5 o'clock, if anybody wants to meet kind of at that Low Bridge area, we can all ride in together.
There you go. And if you want to try and connect directly with Kate, again, you can always switch the chat to private direct message. If you want to share your email with her, go ahead and do that. Thank you, Kate. Hopefully, fellow board member John is ready to go. John is not only one of our board members, but he is a representative on the community advisory group for the Fauntleroy Ferry Terminal Replacement Project. You can learn more by going to that really long web address at WSDOT, or just go to wsdot.wa.gov and do a search for Fauntleroy Terminal Replacement, and you can probably bring it up. John, what do you got for us?
Hi. Well, so last night the Fauntleroy Ferry Terminal Community Advisory Group met, and right now where we're at the phase of the project that we are at is the ferry system has been winnowing down the potential options that are going to be considered for kind of more rigorous evaluation, go through SEPA, FEPA, that sort of thing. The starting list. The process started sort of clean sheet with nothing was being ruled out, and so some of the initial considerations were, not particularly likely. Moving the ferry terminal down to Burien, moving it to the middle of Lincoln Park. Those options were quickly screened out. And in terms of moving I think the biggest thing for moving the ferry terminal somewhere else, all you have to do is look at a map and realize that pretty much where the ferry terminal now is directly, it's the shortest point. It's where there's the transportation infrastructure such as it is with the Rapid Ride C with Fauntleroy. Fauntleroy is a relatively major street. I mean, one of the option was a little bit farther north in kind of the middle of Beach Drive, and so how you tie in traffic to that, not really viable. So those got screened out pretty quickly, and then the remaining options that were on the table that we were talking about last night. Where do I share, Michael?
It should be at the bottom of your screen. If you move the mouse down there, it's just right of center. You should see a green button, a little
Oh,
arrow
there, hello.
pointing up. Yep.
Yes, there it is. So the and just to back up a little bit, just for those not familiar, the reason that the project's happening in the first place is the terminal has got seismic and structural challenges. It's old wood, it's rotting out, it's end of life, rising sea level, and then also operational challenges. It's an 80-car deck, and the current vessels serving that are the Issaquah class, the 124 car Issaquah class. So they can't stage a boatload of cars on the pier. They have to, in order to fill a boat, it relies on having to process cars off the street fast enough in order to get them on the boat before the boat has to sail. And that's been sort of the big challenge. And sort of the timeline for the project is right now we're doing the planning, initial planning that's going to go through 2023, and then late 2023 is when they hope to start the NEPA and the SEPA reviews. And so there's a few remaining alternatives that got screened out last night. One of them was to take Fauntleroy and take one of the travel lanes, turn it into a second queuing lane. So there would be a dedicated Vashon queuing lane and a dedicated Southworth queuing lane, and then one travel lane northbound. And so that creates all sorts of logistical challenges, especially if you happen to live on that stretch of road, being able to get to your home. This table here indicates some of the differences in round trips that would cause. So it creates a lot of bottlenecks, certainly for anyone wanting to go southbound. And so that one got screened out. The next one was to take Wildwood and create a Southworth queuing lane on Wildwood, and the existing queuing lane along Fauntleroy, sort of adjacent to Lincoln Park, would be dedicated to Vashon. And that creates challenges with just safety of movement along Wildwood, uncertainty whether buses could actually navigate that area if there was a lane for ferry queuing, and also creates a really unsafe confluence at the ferry entrance as people are trying to get off. People from the southward people are trying to get across traffic and into the terminal. So that one was screened out. Then one of the next options was where the 76 station is, north of the terminal, kind of that a triangular intersection with 47th. Turn that into a remote holding lot, and vehicles would queue there and then be dispatched to the terminal when it's time to get on the boat. And so that has if you look at that diagram, it's got a huge footprint on existing properties. I mean, there's the gas station, there's the apartment building that's just to the north of that. It would end up closing those stretches of Fontenelle and Othello, and it would also create the logistical challenges of how you would move those queued cars in order from that location to the ferry terminal without people cutting in and sort of creating confusion on where people actually queue. And operationally, that one was thrown out because of that, and also because of the just the amount of property it would require. And then lastly, the other option that got screened out last night was basically repurposing the Fauntleroy or the Lincoln Park parking lot into a ferry holding area. And that was deemed to be unsafe because of interference between park users, pedestrians, bicyclists, and I think they realized that nobody wants to see that lot be repurposed, and any of the park taken up by ferry parking. So that pretty much just left the remaining options to be the current footprint. And one of the things they did commit to was that they were not going to expand the dock to the north into Cove Park. And that was a scenario that got a lot of pushback, just because the Fauntleroy Creek empties into Cove Park, and Cove Park is a very valued natural resource by the folks, folks down there and in West Seattle in general. So it's basically comes down to, not surprisingly, rebuilding the dock at its current size, or rebuilding the dock at 120 vehicles, or rebuilding it at 180 vehicles. So that's kind of what it comes down to. And that's what the next phase is going to consider. So they're going to look at specifics of dimensions, how big that would be, and also looking at more ridership numbers. How often is the bigger pier, how often would the bigger pier be needed? Because some of the Fauntleroy folks have pointed out that this is primarily a 4-hour-a-day problem. It's not a chronic capacity, it's just a peak capacity. And kind of doing a trade-off between a bigger pier, what does it really get us? So that's the where we're at now. Just basically just what the size of the pier is going to be in its current location.
And when you say bigger pier, John, is
Longer.
that essentially just longer?
Yeah, it was.
That's if they're not going to go north, that's really
right.
It's longer. Okay.
Exactly. So that's where that stands.
Folks have any questions for John?
Is the 160 capacity
future vessel expansion or just be a boat in a bit?
Well, I think it gives them more flexibility, the latter. It gives them the flexibility because right now, depending on, I mean, they have no idea what the mix of the sailings, the current schedule they've adopted has. Most of the sailings are dual destinations, so they go to both Vashon and Southworth. So you really don't know what your mix. I mean, they have ideas based on, kind of historical numbers, but they don't know exactly what the mix per destination is going to be. So a longer pier would give them more flexibility to stage, to be able to absorb fluctuations in people trying to go to either destination.
Okay, so like make a parking lane for this will be to Southworth, but we're having a Vashon only sailing next, so feel free to park here if you're going to Southworth, and then if that
Right.
backs up, then it's back to the streets or whatever. So
Right. Yeah, exactly. Just so they have that they can always have room to get I mean, the idea is they want a boat's worth of. They want to be able to, for peak times when there's more people traveling than room on the boat. They want to at least make sure they can stage a boat's worth of cars so they can quickly load it, quickly turn the ferry and get it sailing without having to hold it at the dock and wait for them to process cars off the street through the toll booth. And then also one thing that they're doing a study is for how good to go could be implemented for the ferry. Of course, the variable with good to go out on 520 or the tunnel is their tolling per car. The ferry is tolling per car plus for additional passengers. So how they would implement that. And they're also looking at ways they can utilize advanced ticketing to speed the process of getting cars through the toll booth.
I got another question. So I'm certainly not a regular ferry user, although I was just on it last weekend. So maybe this is a dumb question to people who use it regularly, but is there no way for them to look also at just changing the route of the ships? Like, is there no way to run ships that go Fauntleroy to Southworth or Fauntleroy to Vashon and not sort of like, is there no way to move away from we need to load two things onto the same boat?
Well, in 2009, they had a big schedule revision because the operation, the ferry operation was they weren't doing too well. And one of the things they specifically added to the schedule when they did this rewrite in 2019 was more dual destination sailings. Because what happens, the challenge happens is, all right, so you've got 80 cars, you have a Vashon only sailing. You've got 80 cars on the pier, and you've got say 60 of those are for Vashon. So now you've got to find 60 more cars that are in line on Fauntleroy. What if the first 20 cars are going to Southworth? What do you do? So kind of the idea was, it's like, we'll just take, whatever those first 80 cars are, wherever they're going, we'll load them up and take them where they're going. And that schedule operated, for about a year before pandemic started. And they felt like that schedule was improved the operation. So, in the absence of enough staging capacity, I mean, that's the choice they've made to improve the reliability and timeliness of the operation.
So What's the main issue with expanding the pier? Is it visual effects or traffic, or are there marine implications?
Well, no, it's purely, I mean, I think that it's pretty universal. The opposition is pretty much universally the folks who are adjacent to the ferry terminal. And I think there's and you know, there's a ferry terminal in the midst of a residential neighborhood, and so you know they bear the brunt of that, and so they they have concerns about their neighborhood. I guess they are concerned about doing things that will increase, sort of, if we make it easier, then we've got the old, induced demand.
Mhm.
And then I think there's also aesthetic concerns that, that they don't want, this isn't what they want to necessarily see out their back window. And then there's also environmental concerns, if with the outflow of Fauntleroy Creek, more shading, what's that going to do to the temperature?
Okay.
What sort of environmental effect might that have on the salmon runs, that sort of thing.
Okay, thanks.
But I think if you were to talk to the Southworth and the Vashon people, I think they would probably say pretty much unanimously, we want a bigger pier.
I did have one comment. How long has that ferry terminal been there?
I think it's like since the 20s.
So anyone that's bought a house near the ferry terminal knew the ferry terminal was there. I mean, it's just, I remember a few years ago working on a residential plat, and the county hearing examiner made the plat, developer actually put on the plat is this house is next to next to an airport, acknowledge it. In other words, when you buy a house next to a pig farm, don't complain about the smell.
Well, I think that the neighbors have cited some support from elected officials in the past, where we do not support expansion of this resource, and so I think that they, some of those folks feel that are expecting those commitments to be honored, even after 20-25 years. So it's I think it's knowing Seattle, it seems to be reasonably predictable how things are playing out. It's the folks that are sort of at ground zero there, they are not as enthusiastic about a new big pier as opposed to folks who are riding it to the west.
Well, I mean, and we certainly have a rare opportunity here right now, Mark. I mean, pre-pandemic, anyone who pays attention to traffic flows over the bridge, you could tell when the ferries came in, because that threw a whole lot of traffic at the bridge. And so anytime there was backup on the bridge, potentially every 40-45 minutes, you were dumping 80, 90, 100 cars onto the bridge. And if they're not moving off the other end, then you're just adding more and more traffic. And so, right, we don't often have an opportunity, I'm sure as you know, where traffic disappears. And certainly post-pandemic, we've seen a lot of trips disappear that people aren't taking anymore. And so presumably we're not going to have that kind of impact for a while. But if people continue to move to West Seattle, well, I guess there's limitation to how big the boat is, but certainly folks keep moving to West Seattle, traffic at some point, even in whatever this new commute world looks like, presumably traffic numbers will go up and eventually get back to where we were pre-pandemic. And so now is the time for us to think about how you know, how's transportation getting around? How are people moving around? How are we getting them from place to place? And so I don't know what that looks like, but certainly how this ferry dock impacts West Seattle traffic and travel is a pretty huge issue. So we'll see what they come up with. It sort of feels like they've essentially said, well, we can't move it anywhere else, and we really can't make any changes, but gosh darn it, we're so confused that we can't come up with a plan. And so maybe they really do need, you know, maybe some of the detractors who keep saying they need to go all the way back to the drawing board aren't being so crazy, that something's got to give on one side or the other. Any other questions, comments? Things
I think one of the things too, that the long range plan pretty much has them using the same boats for, there's no plan to go to anything other than 3 124 car boats. So I don't think that there is the threat, I guess, if you will, that you know, a bigger pier potentially leads to larger, you know, just to, you know, jumbo class boats like, you know, to Bainbridge on that route.
Agreed. I think it's just, it would be better to have a little bit bigger pier to store more of the capacity and allow them to more efficiently load and unload the boats. And it'd be less impact to the neighborhood if you have less queue storage on Fauntleroy.
Well, and I think that's one of the cases where it isn't unified opposition from Fauntleroy about a bigger terminal, because I think they do see a benefit to getting cars off the street. Because I mean, basically, you know, the cars are idling and you know, constantly rolling, and it creates kind of a, you know, if you're going to in and out of Lincoln Park, it creates a lot of potential conflict. And you know, so if you could get those cars off the road onto a pier and let them, you know, turn off their motors, there's definitely a benefit to that.
Hey, it might allow us bike lanes on Fauntleroy if we could get the queuing off of Fauntleroy. That's a dream.
Oh, don't you like riding right where the little crack in the concrete is with your bike?
One direction. You're only allowed to go one direction, you know. Right?
Going downhill, I mean, when you got cars queued up, if you want to leave what you call the door space so you don't get nailed by a door, is the concrete crack. I always like that.
All right. Well, thank you, John. I'm going to keep us moving along.
Very informative.
So that we can wrap up. Shocking, we were at the time checks anyway on my agenda. We're right on schedule, but I think we could probably, I don't think we need 30 minutes. So old business, again, all I had on there is a reminder that our next meeting will be November the 17th. I do have one additional thing that slipped in today or this morning in terms of our, for folks who aren't board members, we've been talking about as we return to whatever the post-pandemic world looks like. We're definitely interested in wanting to do some sort of in-person meeting options, but also make sure that we continue this option for virtual attendance, recording, streaming to Facebook, things like that. And so we've been trying to identify possible new meeting venues that might have video screens and other capabilities. And we have been put in contact with the Aegis Living facility up in Admiral that apparently has a theater. that has equipment. So it looks like one or more of us might have an opportunity to go meet with them, check out and see how what their interest is in supporting us and the work that we're doing here in the community. Doesn't mean if you should stop looking for other venues around you, but that is definitely an exciting thing for us to check out in hopes that we will soon be able to investigate some more hybrid meeting options. Does anybody have any questions about any other old business on the table from last month or something that I'm not thinking of? All right, hearing nothing, then I'll move us on to new business. Is there any new business that anybody has to bring up or questions or things that we should follow up on for you?
I'll just say, now that Metro is cutting bus service back even more, I'm more interested in having them to one of our meetings soon. Just to hear what their plans are, and then the next gen Orca cards, of course.
We're definitely reaching out to them about next gen. Is Larry's here? I don't know if Larry can talk, but I think that was that we tossed into Larry's lap to look into for the November meeting. I've also reached out to the South Park remove the folks in South Park who want to remove 99 through South Park, whose proper name I've forgotten at the moment. But I've also reached out to them to see if they would join us for the next meeting. But yeah, definitely with the bridge open, the little bit of extra funding that was running, paying for a few extra runs here, even during the pandemic and even during all this staff stuff, that money's gone away now with the service change. I know I follow all the text messages. I know Tracy at the blog follows all those text messages. And so if you guys don't, the last few weeks, I mean, you can go through a morning where like there's a dozen or more texts coming through in the morning commute with or afternoon commutes with this bus run's been canceled. But we're very much
If they just sent the ones that show the ones that are actually running.
yeah, I mean, but we're it's a nationwide thing. Like it's not this shockingly with some of the things that some of us remember years ago, like this is not a funding issue. There's plenty of funding to run some buses and to pay for drivers. We do not have as many drivers as we had pre-pandemic, and the same's happening, with police and coffee baristas and everything else, and it's the same nationwide. So
and ferries are still out of captains, right?
Ferries is the one area. I mean, I think they're still behind, but there at least there's been a pretty major infusion of money and attention into trying to interest new people into going into doing that training, into getting the jobs. Would love to see maybe something similar. I mean, that's not considered transit by the state. It would be lovely to see that same kind of interest in drumming up more, train engineers, bus drivers, et cetera. The one thing, because I was just reading stats today or yesterday, the one area that is not suffering, Link, they've got plenty of drivers trained up for Link and enough in reserve. So they don't need to worry about cuts to light rail runs, which, won't help us out here in West Seattle for another, 20, 25 years. But yeah, more buses. Buses are definitely full if you haven't been on them. So
Yeah, and then speaking of rail. There's a pending rail workers strike. So if the trains stop running, that might put more trucks on the road.
I thought they
So,
avoided that strike. That was a verdict.
BBC says that they're voting on a new date for a strike. So
I thought they had avoided it. Oh, well.
I don't know. My
Isn't
brother's
isn't
expecting his
President
plant to
isn't
get shut down with when the
isn't
train
President
stops.
Biden going to get them all on a table and personally like arm wrestle them to solve the crisis? Thank you, John, for dropping the link in there. The proper name is Reconnect South Park, with the easy to remember for everybody else, I guess, website reconnectsouthpark.org. Any other new business to bring up? Well, if there is nothing else, I would happily adjourn our meeting 20 minutes early. One last call for any other new business or questions. And if not, I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
Motion made.
All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
And
Aye.
those that say nay, you can be left alone on the
You can stay on here. All right.
And it
It
turns
was
out I
good
may
meeting.
be,
I think Greg did a nice job.
Yeah.
Yeah. Hey,
and there may
Michael.
be a England rail worker strike and a US rail worker strike. And I got the
Oh.
wrong set of news.
Michael, did